Hi everyone, my name is Ann McElhinney.
And I'm Phelim McAleer.
And this is the Ann Phelim Scoop. And in today's programme, we are going to be talking about really big breaking news from the Obamas, who have a very interesting thing to say about global warming. We also have a story from the weekend. We've just come back from the Steamboat Institute in Colorado, where we screened the Gosnell movie and heard an extraordinary speaker, the administrator of NASA, and we want to talk about that.
And we're going to talk about the crisis in the rainforest, which is a huge crisis. Huge. And we're going to talk about unions.
Oh, we love talking about it. We're going to talk about IATSE, who we actually have an experience with ourselves during the Gosnell filming.
And how finally, actually it's tied in with the rainforest story, because it's how people are suddenly realizing that this whole climate change thingy may not work out
May not be just quite so good
for the working man. Great for
man.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
And we're going to talk about a story from Planned Parenthood, because we always like to check in with what's happening, all the good news from Planned Parenthood.
God bless them, because nobody else does.
We have a selective outrage story that we want to talk about. So New York Times, and there's Top Cat. And we also know that somebody wrote to us, one of you guys out there wrote to us and said, where is Mr. Scaredy Cat? So we're going to be showing a photograph of Mr. Scaredy Cat.
Yes, if you go on YouTube, you'll see a photograph
there he is.
Of Scaredy Cat.
And we will also have a story from Crazy California, and we have a recipe. And we have some movie
review.
And we have movie review and movie news. So starting out today, we want to talk about the Obamas. So this is a breaking news story, and it's quite extraordinary. It's
it's a good news story.
It's a huge story. What's really interesting, so the Obamas have come out and said that global warming is not. There's no danger from global warming, and it's a big deal. It came suddenly.
I was so worried.
I was worried, but now that the Obamas have come out and basically said no one needs to worry about global warming, rising sea levels, and it's like, now it was a subtle enough way that they told the story.
But they're gonna. But I suppose they want to bring people in gently, because it's a major.
It's a beautiful story. So what actually happened, Phelim?
Well, they, the way they like to holiday in Martha's Vineyard. So.
And by the way, this is a great story for all you out there who love property porn
and equality. Because what you do, if you're, rather than renting your home in Martha's Vineyard for the few weeks of the year you go there, they have bought a mansion in Martha's Vineyard for $15 million.
That's all.
Because
this is their vacation home, just to underline, by the way. This isn't their home. This is
by the way, we'll put up some pictures of it on YouTube. It's not great inside.
I didn't see. By the way, I didn't see the interior photographs.
There's a room in it with these columns that looks like a parking structure.
Okay. Oh right. Okay. Well, we're going to put up.
It was owned by some guy from the baseball commission or something, and I think he probably, I would imagine, he's very different tastes from the Obamas. But I mean, I'm sure they'll be watching HGTV and Fixer Upper and Chip and Joanna Gaines and all, getting the best advice. But anyway, the great news is the 15 million mansion has a 27-acre beachfront.
I think it's 28. But anyway.
Or is it 29?
It's an awful lot of acres of beachfront. So, Mr. Top Cat, there he is. Who would do this?
If you want to see Mr. Top, go on YouTube.
This is the same. This is Obama. This is Michelle, Obama.
Well, Obama was going to halt
the rising of the tides.
Well, the rising of
Maybe that happened then. Maybe he actually achieved that. It's kind of like a miracle, like the miracle of the Obama presidency. Yes. But either way, he has a house at sea level with a 28-acre, 29-acre frontage on the beach in Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. So I believe, at the ocean, right? That's the actual ocean that he's on there.
The oceans are not going to rise anymore. He's going to halt the rising of the oceans.
He's certainly betting on that. But I just think it's a lovely story, and I think it's just great news for those of us out there who have never been really worried about the global warming crisis catastrophe, So anyway, I just thought we thought we'd share that with you. Yeah. Then just and we just love it, and I think for those of you like property porn, there's all the photographs up there. So we were this past weekend, we've just been in Steamboat, Colorado, at the Steamboat Institute, and to be totally honest, we found the elevation very challenging and had the
elevation of the debate.
And actually, I didn't hear as many speakers as I'd like to have heard. But I have to say that the one speaker that really made an incredible impression on me was the last speaker that they had at the end of the conference. It was the head of NASA, Jim Bridenstine, who told a story that
what is Top doing there? Top licking inappropriately? I can't see.
We'll keep an eye on that. Magda's there to make sure that the cat doesn't do anything inappropriate.
Yes.
But he does have a tendency to throw that leg over his back and do things that we're not even going to talk about
on air.
On air. But the photographs are there, and the moving pictures are there today. But Jim Bridenstine spoke. So you've got a guy from NASA, the head of NASA, and he did talk very technically about the space program. He talked actually very persuasively and impressively about the fact that Trump has basically said we're going back to the moon, and actually not alone are we going back to the moon, we're going to go to Mars. In fact, the whole thing is about Mars. Yeah. And it is a little bit disturbing when you think that it's 50 years since man, walked on the moon. It's been 50 years since the Americans walked on the moon.
It's what I say. Progressives have stopped believing in progress. The reason we're not back on the moon is because the 60s were a time when technology was seen as liberating and progressive. Now technology is seen as frightening, dystopian, and going to destroy the world. And industry is bad, and so they have stopped developing, they've stopped innovating, and that is why we haven't been on the moon for 50 years.
And so he reminded people in the audience, and I have to say, as one of the people in the audience, I cried during his presentation twice. So he first of all talked about Apollo 8, which happened Christmas of 1968. And I don't think I need to remind anyone of what an awful year 1968 was, with the assassination of Martin Luther King, the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, the Vietnam War. People talk about,
Top Cat is now playing with your makeup brush.
Yeah, he needs to not be doing that now. I'm going to take that away from him now. So 1968 was a terrible.
You've just put it in a more attractive way for him.
1968 was a terrible. Phelim, please stop it.
No, give me that.
No,
give me that.
No, stop it now.
I know how to distribute.
I got it distributed. I've got it distributed now.
Okay.
So he talked about the Apollo 8 mission, which happened, at Christmas of 1968, after one of the worst years in American history. And when people talk about how terrible everything is now, how awful everything is now, it's the one thing that always occurs to me is like, really?
1969.
68, actually, 68. 1968 is the year in which Martin Luther King died and Bobby Kennedy. Just a terrible year. So it came to Christmas, and the Apollo 8 missions. It was.
Do you know why how I know that Martin Luther King died in 1968?
Because there's a song by U2, and you probably could sing it, but please God, you won't.
No, well, he died 1 year after I was born.
Look at that. Look at Phelim sharing those kind of biographical details that nobody really asked for.
And please don't use that information for identity theft. I just wanted to make that clear.
So Christmas Eve 1968. I have a
question for Magda there. Magda, there's the air conditioning is on, which we love. Is that affecting the sound?
Oh yeah, that's true. I've got the thing here. I'll turn it off right now.
Is that a yes or no? I want it to be no.
Oh, I think that probably does make a difference. Okay, yes, I've turned that off. And for those of you who heard that hum in the background, sorry about that. But it is actually a pretty warm day here in California.
Yes, we're going through a little bit of heat. We have, but obviously global warming is over because the Obamas have bought a beachfront property. So nothing.
I just love that. I love that story. I love that story so much. I just do. I love that story. Anyway, moving on to 1968 and the Apollo 8 mission. And so, and the names of the guys in this mission don't remain remembered in history, interestingly enough. Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders. So they were going to be the first humans to orbit another world. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary, right? And they take off.
This is orbiting the moon.
Orbiting the moon. And they were asked, because this was televised, and they were asked to speak to the world. So this is the biggest TV event ever. And they were asked, to say some words to the world. And we're going to play a little bit of what they chose. So they could have chosen anything, and it was a very momentous time. Obviously, Vietnam was going on. All kinds of things were going on. And what did they decide to say, these three men? And we're just going to play a little tiny piece of that now.
We are now approaching lunar sunrise. And for all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
So how powerful is that, to hear the words of these guys who actually decided to recite the opening part of the Bible of Genesis, which represented not just Christianity but many of the world's religions. Believe in Genesis, and really powerful. So he starts reading that at Steamboat, and I have to say it would bring a tear to your eye. And then he went on to tell the story of Apollo 11. Of course, which is much more landing on the moon. Oh, and by the way, just before I finish, about the Apollo 8. So they recited these incredible words, and the whole world is listening, and it's Christmas time. And then at the end, they said, which I thought was really, really great, the Apollo 8 astronaut got where they were that Christmas Eve because of bold improvisational call by NASA. With the clock ticking on President Kennedy's challenge to land on the moon by decade's end, delays with the lunar module, whatever, the Apollo 8, they basically arrived and they said, there is a Santa, and by the way, there is a Santa Claus. Because of course, children had been kept up, to listen to this, and I thought it was just a beautiful kind of thing they did.
Did they see Santa Claus?
They may well have seen Santa Claus, while they were there over the Sea of Tranquility, and we're going to show some of those photographs, some of those extraordinary photographs that were shown. The Earthrise, which was the photograph that you talk about inspiring moments in history, and I think that's what President Trump is basically saying. Why are we not? Why do we not go back?
The reason we didn't go back was because, or Americans didn't go back, was because they decided that America was in decline, and Republicans and Democrats decided to preside over a country in decline, to manage a country in decline rather than make a country great again. And as President Trump said in that inaugural speech, the era of American carnage is over. The era, so he's now a genuinely progressive era. President Trump, unlike most progressives, believes in progress. And let's see. Interestingly, they said we want to be in. Was it they want to be in the moon by 2024 or Mars by 2024?
But definitely the mission is to Mars.
Yeah, but the date is 2024, which I think is very significant because it'll be the last year of President Trump's second term.
Very good.
So it'll be an interesting way to end.
So that was
50 years of agreed decline.
So that was
bipartisan decline.
So that was 51. So that was 51 years ago, the Apollo 8, and then 50 years ago was Apollo 11. And he went on to tell that story, and he told a story which I certainly didn't know, and maybe some of you know it, but I think it was one of those stories that got really lost in history, and intentionally so. So he told the story of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin going to landing on the moon. And when they landed, there was a moment where they had to, where they were instructed by Houston to just, everyone calm down now and sit there and try to, gather your strength again, because obviously this has been an extraordinary thing. So they had this time, and we're going to show an extraordinary clip here of what happened then, which is, again, as I said, I was just, I was just tearing up completely because I didn't know any of this, and I hope, the clip basically was that Buzz Aldrin, during that period, and he had it all arranged, and we're going to show the clip of the pieces that he had written out in handwritten. He was the first person to do a Christian sacrament, so he had brought wine and bread from his church, and he took communion. Basically, took communion. He was on the moon, but he was in the, obviously, still in the capsule or whatever. So he's the first one to have done that. And then he recited some extraordinary words. And we're going to play that because it was made into there was a TV series made about 20 years ago
by NASA.
I don't know if it was by NASA actually.
Yeah, it was celebrate the NASA.
It was on HBO. Yeah. And Bryan Cranston read. Played the part of Buzz Aldrin, and we're going to play that clip. And I just thought, for me, it was really, really inspiring and interesting. But what was very interesting as well is that the atheists of America then, had, because of what had happened with Apollo 8, the atheists of America had sued NASA basically, unsuccessfully over this issue. But Buzz Aldrin was sort of told by NASA, he was told, keep everything. He said, I want to take communion now, and they said, can you keep it all very general? But he did. But
I think if they sued now, they'd win.
Yeah, I think
the world has changed.
Yeah, that's a bit.
You would not be allowed to recite a Christian prayer on the moon.
They said keep your comments quite general.
Allahu Akbar.
But he felt it was really important that that people would hear these words, and of course this is what he was thinking of when he was there. And anyway, it was great. We're going to play the clips, and I think you'll enjoy it.
Houston, Tranquility, over.
Tranquility, Houston, go ahead.
Roger, this is the LEM pilot. I'd like to take this opportunity to ask every person listening in, whoever or wherever they may be, to pause a moment and contemplate the events of the past few hours. And to give thanks in his or her own way. Over.
Roger, Tranquility Base.
I am the vine and you are the branches. Whoever remains in me and I in him will bear much fruit. For you can do nothing without me.
So the other thing that happened in Steamboat was that we were asked, and that's the reason we were there in the first place, we were asked to show the Gosnell movie, and we did, and we had a really great crowd came to that, and shout out to Leslie, one of the people who turned up, a local from Steamboat. The mother of, as she described herself, a beautiful Down syndrome boy, and she was really grateful for the film and grateful for what the film has achieved. We also, I met a doctor during the conference, I'm not going to name him, but there was a doctor there, and he'll know himself. And I kind of bullied him. He didn't want to go.
I can't believe that you would bully.
He didn't really want to go, and I said, just go to the movie. And after the movie, he came up and he was in tears at the effect of the movie. And we're going to just play the trailer of the Gosnell movie for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. We obviously we're incredibly proud of what we achieved with the Gosnell movie. It was a 5-year project, and it's not over yet, by the way. And stay tuned here, because there's more projects that we want to do in relation to that story.
On
that
Dr.
story,
Gosnell.
because until the whole world know about it, we won't really rest. So we're not done with that yet.
And it's on Amazon if you want to see it.
Correct.
Coming to Netflix soon, and
also, and I've mentioned this before, that the Audible version of the book as well is available, and it's narrated by myself, and people. We've gotten like 670, I think, 5-star ratings for the book, so highly recommended.
All right, listen up. We are looking for anything that looks like drugs or paraphernalia.
Philadelphia Police Department, we have a search warrant. What is that smell?
Man, you gotta see this. Is this normal?
I don't know. I've never been in an abortion clinic before. You are not going to believe what I saw last night.
How many?
So far, we found over 30 of them. Healthy woman goes into a clinic, comes out dead, and there's no police report?
Files have been moved recently.
Look at this.
You'll be the prosecutor who went after reproductive rights, and you'll be a racist to boot.
You've got a lot of folk who'd like to see abortion outlawed. And this is not going to be the case that gives them an excuse.
Prosecution has offered you a plea bargain, Dr. Gosnell.
Then I would have to admit I was guilty. I'm not guilty.
When you get to the courthouse, you are going to be swarmed by reporters.
You ready for this, counselor? Where is everybody?
When was the last time your division inspected Dr. Gosnell's clinic?
We had instructions directly from Governor Ridge's office not to inspect.
Wouldn't testify in that case about anything. You doubt you'll find a doctor who will.
And you look at the facts, you will see what I see.
An overly zealous Catholic investigator.
Is that what you want to make this about?
There's nothing that man did that protects women or children, and you don't have to be a pro-life activist to see that.
Kermit Gosnell is perhaps the most prolific serial killer in American history.
You better win.
Okay.
So moving right along. The rainforest film. Tell us about the rainforest now. There's been an awful lot of upset over the rainforest lately. Apparently, is the lungs now of the world are choking or something?
The lungs of the earth.
The lungs of the earth. Tell us about the lungs of the earth.
We're destroying the lungs of the earth.
What's happened?
Well, apparently, it's a bit like people only notice homelessness in America. Well, they used to only notice homelessness in America or poverty in America when there's a Republican president. When there's a Democratic president, there's no poverty in America. So when there was a left-wing, remember Lulu? He was the big left-wing.
Oh yeah, in Brazil.
In Brazil, when he was there was no rainforest fires. Now we've got a right-wing president, and suddenly
the whole place is in fire.
They've discovered, and there are slightly more rainforest fires, but it's not unusual at all. Also, this thing of it being the lungs of the earth is a complete pile of cat manure, actually.
Oh, no, Phelim. Well, explain that to us now. That's a strong statement to make. So why do you say that?
Rainforests take in the same amount of oxygen and expel the same amount of oxygen,
whether they're burning or not.
Yeah, there's actually no difference. If it was a grass savanna, if it was a manicured lawn, it would be the same amount of oxygen in and out. They do not provide anything to the earth.
So we have been told. We've all been brought up on this. I've certainly been brought up on the rainforest was the lungs of the world. You're saying the rain. Who now? Is that just you saying that now, Magda?
No, that's what,
I'm looking at Magda there. She's skeptical now.
Well, actually,
I need
better.
To know more.
Leonardo DiCaprio. I'm just looking at Leonardo.
Oh, that scientist.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Love that scientist.
The lungs of the earth are in flames.
One of my favourites.
And he published a picture, and so did Madonna.
Another scientist.
The picture that DiCaprio shared is 20 years old. The French president tweeted a picture which is also 20 years old. The photograph Madonna, she's of one of the older generations, so her photograph is actually 30 years old.
So what are these photographs of? What
forest fires in Montana, India, and Sweden. Right?
And so Madonna tweeted out a photograph of like somewhere else and said it was the Amazon rainforest.
We need to do something.
Okay, have they apologized? Have they?
So the one of the this I'm just reading this article, but it's finally creeping out. The best article to summarize this is one on Forbes, which we'll put up for you there. Why everything they say about the Amazon, including that it's the lungs of the world, is wrong. And it's full of this is a myth. But actually, even if it wasn't a myth, even if it was the lungs of the world, I suppose the question is, why are we in the West and in London and in Manhattan? London used to be an oak forest.
Bring back that forest.
North of England used to be full of forests.
Bring back that
They've
forest.
cut them down to make charcoal for industry so they could get wealthy. And as a result, people in London used to die in their 30s. Average life expectancy in the UK was 30. Now the average life expectancy in the UK
is very old.
It's very old.
It's very old.
Yes.
Just a technical term there, just because I don't think we looked that up, but it's very old.
We used our resources. We burned our forests,
to get rich, the lungs of the earth,
to get rich and to live longer, and so that our kids wouldn't die in childbirth. And now we're saying to the Brazilians, you can't do that. And in fact, we're gonna boycott you and not sign trade deals. We're gonna impoverish your people unless you agree to impoverish your people by stopping development in your country. These people need to use their natural resources as we did. If you think they shouldn't, then you need to hand back every piece of inherited wealth of every person in this country that came from resource use.
Oh, there's a what's it called? What do they call that one? Yeah, there's a reparations that you.
Reparations.
There's a reparations.
Reparations are very popular at the moment. So maybe we should have. That's good. Environmental reparations. We should take all the money from the West and give it to places where we're telling they can't develop. So China, you're not allowed to have any more coal-fired power stations. India, you're not allowed to have any more coal-fired power stations. Brazil, you're not allowed to cut down your forest. Africa, you're not allowed to burn coal either. But we will take all the wealth from here that we got from burning fossil
and just hand it over.
And hand it over.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to start a campaign. Reparations for the developing world. In fact, green rep. Actually, write into the Facebook page and tell us what the catchy title for this could be, because this could go on.
Oh, and I'm sure people would really like that.
When I were a lad, rich white people telling brown people what to do was a thing called imperialism. And I don't see the difference here.
Yeah, well,
I don't see the difference.
Yeah, but they're saving the planet, for God's sake.
I know, but that's what imperialism, funny enough, was
a form of saving the planet then too.
Yes,
yeah.
No, it was going out to civilize these people in bongo land.
Correct.
Right? Whether that was India or Africa or Far East,
and that was a terrible thing.
Well,
but now you've got all the lovely ones from Berkeley going out there and sorting out all these
and telling people from bongo land,
indigenous
you can't do this,
people.
You can't do this, where you can work, where you can't work.
They're sorting out. Well, actually, what they're really doing is they're going out to the indigenous people who would really love to live in Berkeley, actually, who'd love to live in California, and saying to them, do you know what? You stay there in your poverty with your traditional basket weaving and infant mortality, because, it's organic and it's sort of meant to be, we wouldn't want to be interfering, because this modernity thing is such an awful thing, and you don't want it. No, in fact, but I always want these people to go off the grid and move to the rainforest themselves.
I really want them to move to the rainforest.
They need to move to the rainforest.
Need to renounce their American citizenship and move to the rainforest.
Good luck.
You know what? It's crap.
Enjoy. I tell you, you won't like it so much.
It's hot. It's shit.
You won't like it as much when you get there.
There's no air conditioning.
No.
There's no internet.
You know what I'd miss the most? I would miss cold beer, because that's where clean energy comes. Really impacts me is cold beer. There's nothing nicer.
We're trying to bring this podcast to a higher level.
Cold beer, and I know for the last, and I have to say, for the cold beer and air conditioning. Sorry, cold beer and washing machines. Seriously, that's where it's at for me. Yes, actually, and you know what? Cold beer on a warm day, nothing like it.
I would miss the opera myself.
You would.
Yes.
So in our next story, I think we'll leave the rainforest just as it is. Lungs are not lungs, and it's not the lungs. I wish, but good to know, by the way. Good to know that it's not the lungs.
I don't want people to leave the rainforest as it is. I want them to use it and abuse it and get rich and healthy, and then maybe
live long and prosper.
Yes.
Live long and prosper.
Okay, Leonardo.
So the next story we just love the next story we have, because this is a story about a Yahtzee.
It's kind of another. Actually, it's funny. It's similar to the rainforest. That the people are finally realizing that green politics actually affects the lives of the poorest people on the planet the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
So go ahead.
So IATSE is the union that represents theatrical movie theatrical workers, and yes, and they're a tough bunch to deal with.
And hotel workers, I think.
And they're a tough bunch to work with. We worked with them on our last film, and we're not going to get into any of that right now. But that could be another day's story. I think we deserve a whole program about that sometime.
Yes.
So let's try and remember that. That was a cat there now. There was a cat jumping there somewhere. He's all right. He's behind me. Good boy. So IATSE. So IATSE have just written out to all their members and basically said,
it's the Marriott.
Yeah. Do you want to explain a film? So basically, you know the way when you go to hotels now, and by the way, it drives me nuts. It's driven me nuts, this, by the way. You go to a hotel and there'll be a big thing on the bed saying, if you really care about the planet, we're not going to, you will do whatever, leave the piece of paper on the door or leave the piece of paper on the bed or do whatever it is, but you have this signal, which is, the room doesn't have to be cleaned.
No.
The room doesn't have to be cleaned.
It used to be we won't wash your sheets.
We won't do the towels. Yes, the towels.
But now they've moved it. So I think the Marriott
has gone to a higher
level. If you tick a box, they will not clean your room.
For like a week.
For the duration of your stay.
For like a week. And you're spending like whatever. There's Mr. Topcat. He's not impressed with that at all. So basically, we've all seen that. This has been going on for a few years. Now IATSE has got involved. And IATSE are basically calling out the environmentalists and saying, bullshit.
They're calling out the Marriott.
They're saying bullshit to the Marriott and bullshit to this idea of not cleaning the room, this disgusting room. Because the workers who clean those rooms, first of all, aren't getting as much work, number one. And number two, they're actually complaining of strain and stress, because when they do get into the rooms, the room is a mess. It's disgusting. It's not like cleaning a room after one night a person's been in it and you do it every night, and so it's never awful. So the person could be in the room for a week because there might be some green, like greenwashed person, somebody who's really, what's that thing called? Drunk the Kool-Aid, and really believes this stuff and really, genuinely in a kind of a sincere but naive and ridiculous way, wants to save the planet by living in squalor, which I can tell you one thing, anytime I have one of those, anything at all, even approaching that in a hotel where it's like, what's the thing? You put the towels you want cleaned or whatever into the bath. I'm like, let's make this really clear. This room needs to be fumigated every day after I leave it, basically, because because by the way, that's the whole whole thing about staying in a hotel rather than doing Airbnb is that somebody's going to clean up the room nicely for you. But this is, anyway, so IATSE, Phelim, what do you think of them then? What do you think of IATSE?
Well, I think finally, you know, unions are belatedly realising, but actually they don't care, but they're belatedly realising that the green revolution is going to affect the poorest people on the planet the most. So these workers, so the rich people who don't get their room changed once or twice, you know, that's fine. But it's actually cutting working hours from people and making their working lives more miserable. That's the reality of the green revolution. It's austerity. You know, there's an austerity in Britain now and Ireland and all these places, but because it's brought in by right-wing governments after the recession, it's terrible. Austerity is awful. It's a tragedy. It's disgusting. It's exposing the most vulnerable to terrible things. But there's a new austerity coming. And it's an austerity for Brazilians not to have electricity. It's an austerity for hotel workers not to have work. But it's okay because
we're saving the planet.
It's for a moral reason.
Yeah, but IATSE are basically saying this is not saving the planet. They're basically saying this is a fraud. No, they're saying this is a fraud. Basically, they're saying it's a hoax.
I have to say I don't have much time for union leaders either. But I over the last decade we made a climate change documentary about 10 years ago. And
not evil, just wrong.
I remember some evil capitalists.
Oh, evil capitalists.
And I was asking them about the whole, some people involved in energy and oil and that. And I says, what's the story? And he says, don't worry, this pipeline's going to pass or whatever it was at the time because we've got the unions involved and the unions are going to come in. So we're coming in from this side, the unions coming from that side. I think the unions, I don't know if they issued one press release or something.
But it's catching up with them now. But it's catching up.
They don't care. See, the union,
they're noticing now.
The union leadership don't care, right? Because union leaders are not welders, right? They're not steel workers.
They're in a nice office somewhere in Manhattan or something.
They're activists. So when the union, declines, they'll get a job running a think tank or a activist organization or Planned Parenthood or there's all these jobs, left-wing infrastructure jobs for these union leaders, and whether it's leading a union or leading a think tank or leading Media Matters, they don't care. So therefore, they actually don't care about the workers. They're more interested in burnishing their activist credentials. So the leadership of these unions will not get in bed with the capitalists to protect a pipeline or an oil well or oil drilling.
Protect the workers.
Or protect the workers. And I think that ties into the last election, actually. The union leadership endorsed Hillary Clinton. The union membership voted for Donald Trump.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. That's interesting.
In Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. And it was finally the union membership realizing that the leadership have a wider agenda rather than protecting their narrow interests.
Yeah.
And President Trump called that American carnage.
Yeah.
These trade
well, it's
deals.
like and it'll be interesting in the next election, and it's going to be very interesting to see who gets the nomination on the Democrat front. And actually, we don't have time to talk about it today, but I know just to mention about Bernie Sanders, that Bernie Sanders has issued, his Green Deal. And so when Joe Biden issued his new Green Deal or whatever, like people who know about economics, people who understand the numbers, were like going, okay, this is ludicrous on an unbelievable level. But by the way, so now Bernie Sanders has issued his, and it makes Joe Biden's green plan look quite reasonable, actually, but interestingly enough, and I think we said this with the last election, and I think a lot of people, this isn't necessarily a point that everyone in the country got. Oil and gas workers got it, which, by the way, there's about 1 million of out there. That Pennsylvania and places like Ohio. And actually, by the way, upstate New York, etc. By the way, where they don't have fracking, places like that. When Bernie Sanders has come out, and one of the things in his Green Deal, which he's really clear about, is no more fracking. End. Just done. It's going to be complete. That's a great message that I think will be very. I think all that Donald Trump should do, by the way, is just have Bernie Sanders saying that. That should be the ad. Don't even make a comment on it. Just say no more fracking. And by the way, also no more nuclear power, by the way. No more nuclear power. So what we're going to be dependent on is wind and solar if Bernie got in. But anyway, listen, Trump, I think
Trump won't do this, but I think even if he's up against Sanders or Biden in a debate, he should just let them talk. He should keep quiet, but he won't do
Absolutely.
that. But I mean, I know we don't want to talk about the election, but
I don't know. Yes, we're moving on.
No, has anyone just go and have a look? I mean, actually, maybe I'll put them up. There's some pictures of Joe Biden. Have you seen the pictures of Joe Biden? He reminds me now of Carter. Actually, Jimmy Carter, but not 19.
No, are you talking about the fact that he didn't know he was in New Hampshire? He thought he was in Vermont? Are you talking about that?
The guy looks and sounds old. He doesn't look like Jimmy Carter of the 70s, put on an extra jumper, here's a solar panel. That Jimmy Carter. He now looks like I'm a 95-year-old guy who's had a couple of
For
brain
Americans
tremors.
listening, by the way, a jumper is a sweater. Just quick translation there for anyone listening in the United States.
Do you remember that? I think Carter
I remember that. No, put on a sweater. Actually, I love that. Put on a sweater. Yeah, here's the solar panels.
Yes.
And he did put the solar panels in the White House, so at least he walked the walk a little bit. I think they're not there anymore.
No, I think they've been removed.
So, moving on then. But it's and we're going to talk an awful lot more about those green deals probably in the next program because Bernie Sanders just came out with his and it's really quite amazing.
Other news: Planned Parenthood.
What a plan! So, what's the news for Planned Parenthood?
Well, the news is that no one's reported on this, but a Planned Parenthood whistleblower has just been awarded $3 million in Arizona after being terminated for rightfully pointing out procedural flaws and endangerment in Planned Parenthood operations. Well, I mean, it's full of details, and that's why I suppose it hasn't been reported in the media, but it's so full of details in the mainstream media. It's like, so her name is Maya Rodriguez, and she was an illegal immigrant, working illegally at the time in the clinic. And what did the management threaten when she started raising?
They threatened ice on her?
Yes, they threatened her immigration status.
Yes, Planned Parenthood, aren't they great?
Aren't they great? Yeah. So she had things of. She noticed that one doctor had a history, all through of really bad complications. He was mutilating women, etc. So she brought that to the attention of management. They victimized her. So it's just she noticed that children were coming in who were being sexually abused and were pregnant. She wanted to report that to the police. They wanted to cover that up. So
and I think your point basically, Phelim, is this is an incredible story.
She was a former Planned Parenthood Employee of the Year.
Oh, Planned Parenthood. The interesting thing is that so few media outlets have shown an interest in this incredible story.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. So what are we on to now?
So we're basically, actually, funny enough, we're continuing on with another media story. And this is a great one from the New York Times. So the New York Times are writing in complete... By the way, this is another section. I think we need to call this my favorite, because I just met somebody who is now quoting me back to myself from the podcast, which, by the way, is very flattering and fabulous, where I talked about, I'm outraged by your selective outrage. So that's going to be my thing. I'm outraged by your selective outrage. So the New York Times... Are outraged.
Yes.
Phelim, what are they outraged about?
That there is a cabal, a loosely associated cabal of right-wing activists who are dredging through tweets. Dredging.
Is there another word for that, by the way? What's another word for dredging through tweets, Phelim?
It's dredging through tweets.
Through tweets.
And finding anti-Semitic and racist tweets from New York Times reporters in their past.
Oh, shock.
And the New York Times say this is unfair, it's not journalism, it's shocking, it's disgusting, it's awful. And I mean, but they're ignoring the fact that I call it, was it
you call it offense archaeology.
Offense archaeology.
I love it.
It has been a mainstay of New York Times journalism
by the way, but hang on,
5 years.
But also trolling. I think the other point that you make is that trolling through someone else's tweets is actually journalism, right?
Well, I mean, it's not great journalism, but it is journalism, right? It's like, especially a tweet, that someone might have tossed off 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Well, Twitter didn't exist then. But it is journalism. This is what they said or did 5 or 10 years ago. It is journalism. It's pretty bad journalism because very often it's twisted and out of context. But this offense archaeology or Twitter archaeology has been used by the New York Times many, many times. And it's also, there's a whole left-wing industry, Media Matters, where can you imagine there are young men and women in this country who, maybe they're doing it right now to us, whose job it is to sit and listen to transcribe Rush Limbaugh every day.
And if the slightest thing is said that they can find, they can make a massive story of it, they will.
Like somebody in the last election, I think it was BuzzFeed or The Guardian, sat through every Steve Bannon movie he'd ever produced
Unbelievable.
Or
to try and find something.
Yeah, and listen to every Trump interview in the Howard Stern show. I mean,
so basically, I'm going to move you on, Phil. I'm actually going to move you on because
I need moving on.
You need moving on. Well, because it's a good story, but we could talk about it forever. And I want to talk about a couple of other things. Well, because a lot of people have told us, and we've been on the road and we've been meeting people, and a lot of people particularly like our Crazy California section. So I would not want to miss out on Crazy California today. So the Crazy California story that we have today is that the city of Los Angeles have decided to build, mark you, showers for the homeless
under the 405.
Under the 405, by the way, the famous 405 at Venice. Some of you who are local in Los Angeles know that under the 405, which is this massive, massive highway, eight lanes, right, or 10 lanes on each side, kind of, just massive, millions of lanes, and it's basically the artery of the city. And basically, what they've done is they're building showers for the homeless. There's going to be as you drive past there. And by the way, I had a visitor from Ireland here last week, and I was just driving under the 405 on that Venice bridge, and she went, "What's going on here? Like, what is this? Well, what's going to be happening in in future is you're going to have naked men and women showering." So that's the latest one from the Los Angeles Times, from Los Angeles and from Crazy California.
And but we're moving on. That's quite clear. The reason there are all these less homeless, is because the ACLU took a court case. It's called the Jones case, where the city agreed that they would not move homeless people on and not stop them camping on the beach or under the 405. So now they're giving people tickets for walking their dog on the beach whilst homeless encampments are on the beach in Venice.
And we're moving on. The next thing I want to talk about, or I want to get Phelim to talk about
it. Is now attacking my notebook.
But we need to ignore him because we're running out of time.
And he's now sitting in front of the list, so I can't see.
Phelim went to see a movie over the weekend. He went to see Angel Has Fallen, right? And I want to get Phelim to talk about that right now.
You don't want me to talk about... first of all, I have to talk. I was just reading the Hollywood Reporter this morning. So James Gray, who apparently is an indie stalwart. Have you ever heard of James Gray?
Anyone? The indie stalwart.
I'm asking...
Yes, we're asking people who might know
James
more.
Gray, apparently he's done all these indie things, whatever, movies. Maybe he has done ones, but anyway, he's well regarded in the bubble. But they interviewed him his movie Ad Astra starring Brad Pitt, where he's going to deconstruct the masculine myth of the American astronaut. Another reason, by the way, why we haven't gone back to the moon is because men aren't allowed to be men anymore. So how do you get someone to risk their lives going to the moon if masculinity is toxic? So this is the headline, right? The indie stalwart chats about his new space epic, navigating the Fox Disney measure, and why he's not afraid to take on Trump in his next movie. And
he's not afraid to take on Trump. What a courageous guy in Hollywood. Not afraid.
These people.
Somebody wrote that, by the way. Somebody wrote that, and
some editor looked at it and said, "That's fine."
I didn't think that was a joke. Yeah,
it's a joke.
Yes.
The courageous thing to do in Hollywood is to support Trump. The courageous thing in Hollywood is to make
Be Jon Voight. Be Jon Voight. That's what courage looks like.
Make a movie pointing up the ludicrousness of the anti-Trump forces.
So
Angel Has Fallen.
Phelim went to see Angel Has Fallen. And to be honest with you now, Phelim has been a bit excited about this film for a while.
I have.
So Phelim, first of all, is this a yes or a no from us about going to this movie?
100% yes.
Okay, you have 3 minutes to tell us about that, because I want to talk about.
Magda?
He has 3 minutes, but then
Magda's giving me 5.
No, because I've got 5 minutes for the whole to finish up.
Wrap it up. Okay.
She's wrapping. She's doing the wrapping up.
Okay, so.
And by the way, there's no way we're finishing out here without hearing about my fabulous recipe today.
Yes, which I experienced last night.
Correct.
So, Angel Has Fallen. I've been looking forward to it all summer. There's been so many bad movies out in the last few years. I just was so looking forward to it. I was exhausted in Steamboat Springs, suffering from altitude sickness, but I struggled out and I went.
Far too long of an introduction here, but yes, moving on. What's the film like, Phelim? Is this a yes or a no from us?
The film it's a huge yes. The film is a massive attack on the Russia hoax.
Fabulous.
And funny thing is, I haven't seen any of the critics
point that
out because they don't realize it. I mean,
Morgan Freeman, by the way, is Morgan Freeman Trump now? Is that what you're telling me?
Morgan Freeman, right, is playing President Trumbull. Trumbull. He's played President Trumbull, who wants to encourage better relationships with Russia. right?
Lovely.
Not just Russia, and not with some Russian president, but with Putin. There's a picture of him with Putin, right?
Fabulous.
It's not some fictional Russian president.
So this is a yes.
And the deep state and his own administration want more wars, and they want to attack Russia, and they want to support the military-industrial complex against this president. And that is the storyline. And it's like...
And it's super entertaining.
And there's lines like, 17 of our intelligence agencies agree that the Russians were behind meddling in the last election. Like, there's actual lines like this. And Morgan Freeman's sitting there, and Morgan Freeman doesn't realise, and the mainstream movie critics don't realise that this is a huge attack on the Russia hoax, the Russia Spygate hoax. It's worth going just for that.
Okay,
right?
well that's a good endorsement. I would say, but it's also entertaining.
It's
right?
entertaining. There are a few holes in the plot where the villains do. When you look back, you go, the villains were really dumb to do that. In fact, that didn't actually make sense. But
Phelim, I want to do two things before we finish up, because very important. First of all, I obviously want to do the recipe, which I'm going to do next. But I need to also remember that we've had some people write in complaining that they have not seen or heard. They haven't seen Scaredy Cat, and they don't believe that he exists. So we're throwing up a picture of Scaredy Cat right now, so people get a look at him. And the last thing I want to do
is Scaredy Cat.
It lives up to his name, and it's and you know, we're not trying to.
We think Top Cat's not in the room now, so we can say this. I mean, he's better looking than.
He's a very good looking cat, but he's not very smart, which is an interesting thing actually when you think about it, because you know some humans can be a bit like that too. So in terms of the recipe of the day, you know, this is a kind of recycling that I can get behind. And Ben is in the room now. Ben thinks that bread is evil, right? And he's not alone in thinking that. By the way, Magda's in the room, and Magda thinks that bread is evil, and they both feel better because they don't eat bread. Well, the rest of us don't have any food groups that we want to neglect. So here's what is tragic that can happen in your kitchen, and I have a really great solution to it. Somebody might come to your house and bring you fabulous fresh croissants, or you might buy fresh croissants, and then you may not be able to use them all. And like a week passes, and you look, and you have a croissant there, not molded, nothing at all, not even slightly, but super, super stale.
But hell hath no fury like a stale croissant.
And you know what? This is the recycling that I can really get behind. I love recycling. My mother did not like throwing things out, and I do not like throwing things out. And I really feel strongly about that, actually. I hate wasted food. Phelim knows that. So last night we got back from Colorado. We were very tired. I had nothing really in the fridge, and then in the distance, I spotted this croissant, all stale and lovely, but still full of butter. And I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to repurpose that. And this is something, there is an alchemy in bread and butter pudding. For those of you obviously out there who know exactly how to make bread and butter pudding, there's an alchemy in it. And it's like, there's something miraculous in it. Because you just mix, you know, you do, I've got, the recipe is going to go up there. But you basically put together eggs, cream, some sugar, and bread, some kind of bread, and preferably really stale bread. You pop that in the oven, and what comes out is nothing short of magnificent. And so last night I had the one croissant, quite a big croissant, broke it up, buttered it, and put it out there. And I have to say, I threw in some frozen berries that I had in the freezer. And by the way, this great thing to do with berries, if you got berries and you can't eat them and you're thinking, oh God, I'm going to throw them out, or they're going to end up with a beard on them. Before anything of that happens, throw them into the freezer. You're always going to use them in a smoothie, or you can always throw them into a bread and butter pudding.
Can you use actual frozen berries as well?
Oh, you can, you know.
From a shop?
Oh, from bought in a packet. And by the way, you can get a great massive packet of frozen berries in Costco, of course. But Phelim, this is what Phelim got for his dinner last night. We were kind of naughty, like it was like not exactly a 3-course meal, or not exactly a square meal, or whatever shape of a meal. We just had that dessert, magnificent dessert, with a big massive walloping piece of vanilla ice cream and some pouring cream. Magnificent. And you'll see the photographs, and I'm going to get better at taking my food porn photographs, but I honestly think there is nothing like bread and butter pudding. And by the way, and I'll do this, I'll mention this again, but equally, if you ever have a birthday party at your house and there's like a massive big birthday cake and you can't finish it, and it's like a brilliant cake, and like maybe a week passes and you're looking at it, you maybe have it in the fridge, it's super stale, but it hasn't gone off, do the very same thing. Break it up, put it into little ramekins, or put it into a big baking thing, a baking container that's very, very, oven worthy. You know, pop it in at 350. Make the custard mixture with the eggs, the cream, the sugar. I used also maple syrup. Throw that in, and it is amazing. And people will think you're a genius, because I've done it. I did that recently, and my friends thought I was a real genius for doing that, for repurposing it. So you talk about recycling. check me out on the recycling. That's all we've got time for today. Except for
Costco?
the one thing, the Costco story. Quick Costco story, Phelim. What happened with Costco? We love this story.
A couple, like a great romantic comedy, a couple met in the Costco aisle.
The girl was in Hawaii in the Costco, and she's looking at the mac and cheese, and she's thinking to herself, and she's chatting with her friend, and saying to her friend, God, if only mac and cheese was good for you. And some guy, randomer, comes along and... Well, the rest is history. They started up a conversation about mac and cheese.
They've brought their wedding dress and all that, and they've just had a kind of a wedding.
They did a photo shoot in the Costco aisle where they met, and it just it's Costco's, like, isn't it just the best? Yes. Yeah, we just love Costco. So that's us. That's us for this week, and we'll see you next week. And please, don't forget to like the Facebook page, to like the Ann McElhenney Facebook page, the Phelim McAleer Facebook page, the Ann and Phelim Scoop page, the AP_Scoop on Instagram.
Send the link to this podcast to anyone who might be interested.
Yeah, exactly. And let us know what you think, and write to us on Facebook. And for sorry we didn't shout out to people who've been writing to us, but we've been reading them, and we thank you for all the real kind of things you've been saying. Thanks so much. Bye now. Bye.